The 1960s was a turbulent time in American history. Movements against the Vietnam War and for civil rights engulfed the nation and led to a broader questioning of American society and governance. People of all ages demonstrated in cities around the U.S. demanding change of all types. One activist in particular, named Howard Zinn, took his activism a step further, becoming an author and historian, writing dozens of influential books and articles. Howard Zinn devoted his life to the betterment of humanity through his many efforts and sacrifices to end injustice and reform the system of law and order. As a historian, he is considered by many to be a historian who made history. Howard Zinn was born on August 24, 1922, and raised in the slums of Brooklyn, to parents who were Jewish immigrants and struggled to provide for the family by working factory jobs. At an early age, Zinn had a passion for books and read many books about fascism in Europe. With this knowledge, he discussed and debated ideas with communists in his neighborhood. At one point, these communists invited him to participate in a rally at Times Square. Although this rally was peaceful, the participants were threatened and attacked by mounted police. Zinn was knocked unconscious, and at this point, his view of the political world changed forever. He later said, "From that moment on, I was no longer a liberal, a believer in the self-correcting character of American democracy. The situation required not just a new president or new laws, but an uprooting of the old order, the introduction of a new kind of society, cooperative, peaceful, egalitarian." Zinn's activism began very early on in his life. He became a combat pilot in the United States Air Force during World War II. After the war, Zinn reflected upon his actions as a pilot that engaged in bombardments and regretted them. Not surprisingly, his experiences in the war were what shaped his anti-war views, and led him to later write his book The Bomb, describing the times when he dropped napalm on the French town of Royan. In this book, he portrays a soldier's actions as futile and deplorable, showing his opposition to the act of war and its consequences. These experiences are what shaped him into an activist and created his strong belief of the importance of knowing history. Zinn was eager to share his message with the world, so after graduating from college, he took a job at a historically black school, Spelman College, as a history professor. Zinn observed that many of his students were involved in a resistance against the social order of the time, this being just a few years before the civil rights movement. To their delight, Zinn arranged a picket against racial injustice, becoming an adult advisor for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SNCC. His actions in the fight for civil rights angered the president of Spelman College, resulting in him being fired for his actions. However, he continued to do work for the SNCC and recognized the need for documented history. Howard Zinn began to write influential books such as LaGuardia in Congress and The Southern Mystique. During the Vietnam War, Zinn got a job at Boston University and stood up for what he believed in by going around the country making speeches in which he encouraged people to protest against the war. Realizing the lack of political support for the anti-war movement, he wrote a small book titled The Logic of Withdrawal. This book forwarded the idea that the U.S. should leave Vietnam as soon as possible. The book even included a powerful speech that he wrote for President Lyndon B. Johnson to recite. To this day, this book is considered the most influential book written against the Vietnam War. He also participated in strikes at BU, joining the union of the staff and striking for increased wages and benefits. Although Zinn was arrested multiple times, he stayed determined even in the face of violence and authority. Clearly, Zinn was an activist for all the people, taking a stand against all forms of injustice. Later, Zinn wrote Disobedience and Democracy: 9 Fallacies of Law and Order, which analyzed social reform in the past and discussed the importance of nonviolent civil protest. After being fired from Boston University, Zinn realized there was no full text of his coursework. As a replacement, he wrote his most popular and influential book, A People's History of the United States. This book was very meaningful because it gave an alternative point of view that cannot be found in any textbook. His book dealt solely with the social issues and affairs of U.S. history, including the mistreatment of Native Americans during westward expansion, and the true reason why Vietnam won the war. In one example, he begins his chapter about the Vietnam War with a powerful statement. From 1964 to 1972, the wealthiest and most powerful nation in the history of the world made a maximum military effort with everything short of atomic bombs to defeat a nationalist revolutionary movement in a tiny peasant country, and failed. When the United States fought in Vietnam, it was organized modern technology versus organized human beings, and the human beings won. Even after the success of A People's History of the United States, Zinn continued to write meaningful books and articles, and participated in many interviews where he shared his points of view, whether they be accepted or controversial. In these documents, it becomes clear that Zinn always stuck with what he believed in, rather than following the beliefs of his peers. Until the end of his life, Zinn continued to spread his message across all mediums, making speeches and participating in interviews in the popular media. As a sign of the coming of more enlightened times, Zinn was invited back to Spelman College to give the commencement address in 2005 by the president, who admired the work he did throughout his lifetime. Many of the people he met with considered Zinn their hero and were thankful for his guidance. On January 27, 2010, Howard Zinn died of a heart attack in Santa Monica, California. His death resulted in an outpouring of tributes and obituaries from people whose lives were changed by him and his writing.
Zinn's vision had mass appeal for the American public, and he played a pivotal role in our nation's most important grassroots struggles for social justice since the 1960s, most notably around the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement.
He was exactly as he appeared to be. For some folks, there's a public persona, and then there's that other person that shows up when the lights are turned off, or when the cameras are turned off. My father was the same person all the time.
He and I arrived at Spelman College in 1956 as freshmen. He was straight out of Columbia. He came down to chair the social science and history department, and I came from my little rural, black, segregated town in South Carolina. But I've always felt that that was just an absolutely almost ordained moment, and I don't know what I would have done. Beverly Tatum, I see our president here, I don't think I would have survived at Spelman in the 50s, the late 50s, without Howie. But he was extraordinary, and he didn't just teach, he lived what he taught.
These are the voices of just a few of the millions of people whose lives have been changed by Zinn's writing and inspired by his actions. Through all of this, it is made clear that Zinn was an activist for all the people, who not only had progressive ideals, but set an example for others with those same ideals, taking action rather than waiting in the shadows for someone else to make the world a better place.